Hello, everyone. This is Yamina from Dr. GPCR, and this is a very special podcast episode. This is episode 150 of the podcast. We started this journey 4.5 years ago with the idea to bring together everyone in the GPCR field, to talk to everyone on the Dr. GPCR podcast, to shine a light on the scientists behind the discoveries. And I want to say scientists at every level. Since then, we've talked to a lot of people in the field. There's a lot more people we want to talk to, but tonight, I'm very excited to have with us our Dr. GPCR volunteer team, who will go around and introduce, everybody is going to introduce each other, and then we're going to have a conversation about them, about how they think about Dr. GPCR, but also we're going to have some really great news to share with you in this podcast episode. So let's start us off with Dr. Shivani Sajdev, who was actually our first Dr. GPCR volunteer. And I'm excited to have you here, Shivani. Good to see you.
Thanks, Yamina. So as Yamina said, I was a Dr. GPCR volunteer, and I'm going to introduce myself as that. But yes, we're all here because we love GPCRs. So I did my undergrad in India, and I moved to Australia, where I did master's in the Master of Research, as well as like a dissertation project in cannabinoid receptor pharmacology, which is the most abundant GPCR in the brain. And then I did a PhD following that, which was again in GPCRs. And after that, I moved to USA. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health, and I'm working on like using new chemical biology tools to interrogate cell surface receptor function. So yeah, been working on GPCR for quite a long time. Yeah.
Good to have you on. Kind of a side story before we move on to the next person is when we started Dr. GPCR, the idea came in January 2020. And in February 2020, we were recording the first Dr. GPCR podcast, the first one with Dr. Paul Insel, the second one a week later, actually, with Dr. Thierry Hébert. And I think, Shivani, you and I met around July of 2020. Yeah. We had put social media posts and put them on, and you were the first person who sent her resume and said, I'm very interested, and we connected, and I think the rest is history. Yeah. And people should know that you're the source of the initial almost a year of Dr. GPCR monthly newsletters.
That's right.
You collected the papers, you curated the papers, we figured out how to do this, how to send...
And social media posts.
And then we evolved into social media posts. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You had your hand in lots of things at the time. And I'm very grateful for everything that you've done. It's been great working with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I had opportunity to work and build this ecosystem with you, you know. Yeah. But now, like, that's what I've been saying now. It's like a big team, right? Like this, like we've got so many volunteers working on Dr. GPCR. And I remember how it started and where it is now. It's like, it's great.
Thank you. And I can't believe it's been only, quote unquote, only 4 years, and here we are. Lots has happened. We've done lots of work. But thank you, Shivani, for being here. All right, let's move on to our next Dr. GPCR volunteer. And throughout the introductions, we'll add a little bit of stories as to that the person's role or what that person did during that time. So Monse, you're the next. We're going by order of...
Okay. My name is Monse, and I did my master and my PhD in cell biology at Investav in Mexico City. And I met Yamina by the end of 2022 when I was graduated. And for the past 7 years, I have been researching the mechanisms mediated by GPCRs, especially latrophilins, within the context of cellular communication. And right now, I'm a postdoc at UNC in Chapel Hill. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Monse. And just to kind of also offer a little bit of background, you and I got introduced through your PhD advisor, Dr. Anthony Boucard, as well. And it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you so much for everything you've done. And Monse, since she joined, what was one of the couple of things you've been doing, also social media, also newsletter, just to offer some insights. Shivani, you remember we were collecting the papers by hand by going actually to Facebook, to Dr. Hebert's GPCR consortium, and we were using that. We've changed that a lot since then. Right now, it's a PubMed search that, and you get a table. And Monse and Ines, who unfortunately could not be here, actually categorize them in there. But since even since that version, we got to a point where ChatGPT helps us categorize, and our volunteers just double check. Exactly, just double check. Just double check ChatGPT. So I don't know how many hours it took you. I know in the beginning, I think I did a couple, and it was like 4 hours. A month.
A lot of time.
4 hours, wow.
Yeah, and we were doing like, I know like you guys have weekly newsletter now, because I see like I get an email for weekly newsletter of GPCR, but like earlier we would have monthly version, and then again we will categorize them according to the topic specific GPCR related topics. But it took time, because we'll have to go to like as you mentioned, that Facebook page, Dr. GPC, like no, it was GPCR consortium.
Yes, it's Terry Hebert's lab. Actually, it's Terry who always posts on. I think he will post 1 or 2 papers a day that he actually likes, and we thought this would be a good source, a very targeted source of references.
And I think I also use Google's Scholar Alert. And then I would categorize them manually.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. And now it takes about 20 minutes.
Or less.
Wow. I'm so jealous.
For the volunteers. No,
but it was worth it, I would say, because that would help me keep update with like the literature. And GPCR is a crazy field right now, because there's so many papers that comes every day, right? Like maybe 5 or 6 or more than that cryo-EM structure, like every month, right?
I think what one thing we should be doing, and this is more for the internal team, is go back for the past year and look at all the papers that came out, because we have the tables, and try and count by topic or by receptor family or by technique, cryo-EM, by structure, how many of these came out in the past year, and we can break it down and get some really nice statistics around that.
Right. Yeah, that would be cool.
All right. Super. Thank you, Monse. All right. So then let's go to our newest, brand new, fresh Dr. GPCR volunteers. And I'm going to start with Yatsu.
Hi, I'm Yatsu Lee. I'm from Taiwan, and I just graduated with a master's degree yesterday. So
congratulations.
Thank you. And I will join the medical science PhD program at University of South Florida this August. Yeah, so I will be a PhD student right now. And I'm in the lab. I use the ultra large virtual screening to identify agonists or antagonists that against the GPCR class A family. So that's what I'm doing in the lab.
Very cool.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Yatsu. And just to add to what you just said, I think Yatsu is our first volunteer with computational background. So, and we actually can't wait to try and use those computational skills. Yatsu, also, if I remember correctly, you do like scientific illustrations.
Yes, I enjoy
so I can't wait to take advantage of that.
I know. I think you've been trying to incorporate something like that for a really long time, as far as I remember. So yeah, having Yatsu in the team would be so beneficial for Dr. GPCR in many different ways, and for Yatsu too, I guess. Yeah,
I'm so glad that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, let's go next to Cam. Cam, if you could introduce yourself and tell us, how did you get into studying GPCRs?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Cam.
And I'm also a volunteer at Dr. GPCR. And outside the ecosystem, I did my Bachelor of Pharmacy in Vietnam. And then I moved to Australia to do my master at Monash University. And currently, I'm a first year PhD student at the Monash Institute of Pharmaceutical Science. And my project focuses on drug discovery targeting the adenosine receptor and the G protein coupled atrazine receptor for the treatment of cardiovascular diseases.
Thank you, Cam.
Yeah.
It's good to have you. You're one out of two of our volunteers from the world down under. Hence the reason why we're having to adjust our meeting times and the recording of this meeting. And I'm happy to have you on board. Very excited to have you on. And last but not least, John.
Hi, everyone. So my name is John Tay Azitaku. So anyway, currently I'm a postdoc at Monash University. I did my undergrad back in Ghana, which is West Africa, and in pharmacy. And then I moved on to China to do my master's in farm chemistry. I then moved on to do my PhD at Monash University in Australia, and I've continued to stay at Monash, where currently as a postdoc I'm working with Patrick and Denise, where I do a lot of drug screening. And so yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this team, and I'm looking forward to making things together and making the group more vibrant, I guess. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you, John. Just for the audience who will be listening to this, that's Patrick Sexton and Denise Houghton in Australia. It's funny because whenever we record podcast episodes, I just recorded actually 3 consecutive podcast episodes in 2 sessions with Dr. Arthur Christopoulos. And whenever he was mentioning the names, Bob, Terry, and all of these names, and in my mind I'm like, okay, I think everyone in the field knows who Bob is because this is Bob Lefkowitz we're talking about, and Terry Avera. But it's such an interesting feeling to hear someone like Dr. Arthur Christopoulos who talks about these very smart, highly intelligent GPCR scientists who have contributed tremendously to the field, and on the receiving end of the conversation thinking, oh, of course, I know Bob, I know Terry, I know they've been on the podcast. It's actually quite a cool thing to say.
Yeah, no, you're right. When you hear them, it's like they're friends, there's like a group, and then you're like, oh, it's like you won't hear them talking about like each other as a friend, right? Because you always see them as like big names in the GPCR field, like experts in the GPCR field.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's what I really like about GPCR, Dr. GPCR podcast. Otherwise, you would never know them as in person, right? You talk about their career trajectory, how they got where they are, and so many things and beyond. Yeah.
Exactly. So no, I think you're right, and that's exactly the goal of the podcast, is to show that you look up someone's name like that who's been in the field for 20, 30, 40 years, and you read their papers, and in your mind you have, at least in my mind, I had this preconception of, oh my God, you put these people on a pedestal,
right?
And then when you get to talking to them, and that's the other beauty of the GPCR field, I think everybody or most people are very approachable. And then when you start talking to people like this, you're like, oh wow, okay, so we're interested in the same field, where we can have a nice conversation, a very pleasant conversation, and that's when you realize everyone is just human. And everybody has their own story.
And maybe 30 years ago, they were in your shoes, they were also doing a postdoc. They were also looking for a faculty position, they're also starting their own labs.
Exactly. All right, so now that we've gone around with the introductions, as most of you know, you who are here in this meeting, but also anyone who listens to the podcast, we always have an episode outline. And the episode outline is a type of, conversation starter questions that we use to have a conversation with our guests. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't. And I'm giving you this background information as a snippet as to what happens behind the scenes during a podcast recording. And we do have an episode outline here for this podcast as well. So how about we start with a little bit of history, and I'd like us to go around again, and I'd like to hear more about when did you first hear about Dr. GPCR and what got you interested in joining the team. So Shivani, I'll let you take it from
Yeah.
here. The more stories you can add, or more context, the better.
It's been 4 years, yeah. I mean, it's been a long time.
I know.
But I think I've heard about Dr. GPCR from your podcast, with like the first podcast with Dr. Paul Insel. That's where I got to know about Dr. GPCR, and I saw your Twitter page, and I realized that you're trying to make an ecosystem and get everyone under the same roof. And I'm like, oh wow, there could be a community for everyone who works on GPCR, and I thought that was remarkable. And there was COVID time, which is when you started Dr.
Yeah.
GPCR Ecosystem.
Yeah.
I thought I would want to contribute to the richness of this community somehow. And that's when I emailed you that how can I help? And like I've always been big fan of Dr. GPCR podcast. I would say I love them. I would always hear them like on my commute. Like I would walk to work. It's 20 minutes. I'll pick some episode and hear it on my way. And I think whatever episode I pick up, it's like I always have something to learn, or like something that would motivate me that day and be like, okay, start fresh, or like start as if it's day one again. And I like we talked before that you get to know about the career trajectory of all these big names in GPCR, and you would not know this otherwise, because I don't think I would go and ask them like and you have a good storytelling ability, so you know how to make the other person comfortable and ask what's more important. And sometimes that helps, like because you're also thinking, oh, how did he get there, and then you would ask that, and that's what I really like. And I think not everyone is capable of doing that, so you've done amazing, Yamina.
Thank you, Shivani. And one interesting snippet is that you're right, it was COVID. And Dr. GPCR is not a consequence of COVID. It's just a coincidence. It was just a coincidence. And I do remember talking to you for the first time on Zoom. It was, I think, July of 2020, or during that period. And I took the call from my car.
I know. You said that. And sometimes you would like record podcasts from your car or from your closet.
Correct.
Wow, crazy.
From the car, because we used to live in a small apartment, and there was not a small, like a nice place where that was soundproof. So I had to do this from the car. So the car was parked in front of the gym that had Wi-Fi.
That's
and
funny.
calls, and I actually recorded a couple of podcasts there. I remember at least three podcasts. One where I had morning sickness because I was pregnant with our second child, and it was very difficult because I had to go through the podcast and thinking, okay, this has to be done no matter what. One with Brian Roth. And Brian, I showed him the car, and he said, well, this is about the size of my first lab. And I thought that was hilarious. I think we've come a long way. And then we moved on to the closet, where a desk was secured to the wall, and I would put the computer and the microphone on it. And actually, the podcast episode with Dr. Bob Lefkowitz was recorded from that closet. But I was sitting sideways because I was 8.5 months pregnant, and I couldn't fit into the small space anymore.
Oh my God.
And one time the desk fell into my lap as well, during the recording of the podcast, and I was like, okay, we're almost at the end. I'm not gonna even mention it. People won't. And at the time, we were not recording videos, so you couldn't see it. And then after a while, we realized, well, why don't we record videos? That's also interesting to put on YouTube.
Yeah, GPCR has come a long way.
I know we have.
Yeah.
We have. All right,
Yeah.
let's move around, and I'm gonna go in the same order. Monse, where
Yeah.
did you first hear about Dr. GPCR, and what got you interested in joining the team?
Yeah, so I was doing the PhD when I found this video, this interview with Dr. Simon Promel and Ines Lepcher, which are like big researchers in the field of addition GPCRs. And I found this video because I was seeking for kind of motivation. And their stories were very inspiring to me. So after that moment, I started following Dr. GPCR, and actually because for the same reason, the fact that this kind of podcast show the other side of the scientist, the human side of this scientist that I admire. Um, um, I just feel very, very in love about Dr. GPCR, and after that, I decided to join to Dr. GPCR because I think was curiosity. In the beginning, was the curiosity about connecting with the GPCR world, and because also I was trying to find a postdoc position in the States. So I thought that was a really good beginning. And right now I just realize and recognize the importance that being a part of this type of projects is very is very important, like because the purpose of Dr. GPCR about understand GPCRs better around the world is just amazing.
Thank you, Monse. Thank you. One thing I wanted to mention is that by the time you joined in 2022, that was the time where we started thinking about how do we were switching websites. So we had a very simple website in the beginning. And then I think in during that time was when we were thinking about a new interface, which is the interface that we know now. And this current interface is getting a renewed look, but also not only just the look, but also from a user standpoint. Also, we want to make it easier to use. But the point I wanted to make is that was the time where we started thinking about contributor articles. And all of you on this call know what these contributor articles are, and the audience hopefully listening to this podcast know what they are. And every 6 weeks, every one of our volunteers gets to publish a piece of at least 500 words on the topic of GPCRs. They pick the topic they want, and they publish it under their own name within the ecosystem. And I want to hear Monse, considering that actually, it's funny because none of us on this call and none of us on our team, English is not our first language.
Yes.
So, and it's an extra effort, not only to do science, but to do science in English, and then to write about it on a regular basis. And I want to hear, Monse, from you, how do you think writing these contributor articles has helped, or has been like, what's your impression from that?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the important reasons too. I decided to join to this project because I recognize that I'm a bilingual in construction, so I needed to expose myself to the language, to the culture, and to me has been a really amazing journey because at the first time I was very anxious about expose the content I was writing in the website, and but then I realized that it's not about the language, it's about the idea, it's about the collaboration, it's about the science. So I'm starting enjoying right now after almost 1 or 2 years being a
Yeah.
volunteer. I'm starting enjoying writing the contributors articles. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. The reason I was asking is because it's no easy task to do this on a volunteer basis, but at the same time, the reason why I proposed it back in the day, and it's still going on, is that I think it's important to be able to put this out there, to use your skills, develop better writing skills.
Mhm.
We can always, there's no such thing as somebody is already great from the get-go at everything. So it's a learning curve, and I can't wait for the rest of our volunteer team to start doing that, because I think what the audience should also know, John, Cam, and Yatsu joined the team recently, less than 3 months ago. So we have a brand new, fresh team there. Thank you, Monse.
Yeah, and also thank you, Yamina, to give this type of opportunities, and especially for people like me, that we are from development countries where English is like a huge thing for us. When we decide to leave our country and start a new journey in a different country. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amina.
Thank you, Monse. And you've done a great job. And my idea behind the contributor articles, to just give more context, was, publishing a scientific research paper is very difficult, and that takes years. But with this one, this is something that you can control. And if you like writing, you can publish almost as many as you want, as long as we talk about it and we know when that is coming. But that is your work. That shows your creativity. That shows your dedication, not to Dr. GPCR, but to the community, to the field. And that's something that you can take along if you go for a job interview, if you're looking for a postdoc, if you're looking for anything. You may say, well, I have 3 peer-reviewed publications, but I've published 40 articles. And look, people, and these articles are very much liked. Every time one of these comes out, in the first 24 hours, you have at least 100 reads, which means that there is a demand for it. Thank you, Monse. All right, let's continue going around, but I want to mention to everyone on the call, I muted you so that the image doesn't flip, because every time somebody talks, then we see the other person's image. And please feel free to ask me any questions. I know we have a section for questions for me, but if you have questions while we go around, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask your questions. Super. All right, Yatsu, your turn. When did you first hear about Dr. GPCR, and what got you interested in joining?
I think about 1 year ago, because I have a habit, just like when I eat lunch, I will watch a Twitter page. And one time, because I follow a lot of GPCR professor on Twitter, I forgot who retweeted our Twitter, and I watched that and clicked that, and I thought, wow, a lot of resource about GPCR, so check it out. So I just joined the ecosystem, and right now I have a habit, because our newsletter will output in the Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah. And then I will read that every day to check, because we have so many paper on newspaper, so I will reach 5 paper every day and learn a new thing about that. So yeah, that's my start point. And because I'm always passionate about GPCR, so I also really appreciate Dr. GPCR has done so many in our scientific community. So they collect a lot of GPCR papers, so let me don't go to different resources to find the paper. So save a lot of time for me, I would say. So this work has a big impact for me. So I want to join and contribute. So I emailed Yamina, and that's why I'm here right now.
Thank you, Yatsu. And one thing I want to mention to all of you and to those listening to the podcast, if we miss a paper or you think there's something that we should be adding, we're always happy to get emails. And very soon, well, actually the hello@drgpcr.com email is live, up and running, but we have a new email because I have news. Our newest email, which I'm hoping we're going to be switching to, is hello@drgpcr.org, because since about 2 weeks ago, we officially got the nonprofit status from the IRS. So we are officially a nonprofit organization, which is fantastic. I'm very excited about that. This allows us to open new avenues for Dr. GPCR. And I have more good news about Dr. GPCR in a bit. Thank you, Yatsu. All right, let's move on to you.
So, I first hear Dr. GPCR actually came along with on of my GPCR journey, because at that time I started to have a passion for GPCR that I want to do, and then I just typed GPCR in YouTube to know more about it, because I'm just like a type person who want to know more about people backstory.
Yep.
And what I found is that the podcast from Dr. GPCR, and I started to listen to them hours and hours to learn more about not only the field, but also the people who try to invest their time and effort to advance the GPCR field. And so actually, I still remember the first time I joined the ecosystem when Yamina asked me that what I did with GPCR. And at that time, the experience I have was 2 weeks placement following John doing his experiment. So basically, I did not have any prior experience before joining the ecosystem, but it helped me a lot. And it's like a sort of motivation for me when I have some difficulty in my research, or when, like when we're doing research, we have a lot of the bad moment when experiment did not go the way we want. And the GPCR is the place where I, like get motivated. And so that's also the reason why I want to join the platform, because I want to assist people like me who want to start their journey in GPCR, to know where to find information and hear, like how people get to the place they are now. So yeah, that's my story.
Thank you, Cam. And you make a great point. And I think everyone who's either listening or here on the call knows about the ecosystem. And one thing I wanted to mention is that we screen who joins the ecosystem. So yeah, when you fill out the sign-up sheet, we actually want to make sure that you are part of the field, and you don't have to have X number of years. You just have to tell us how you are connected to the field. It can be your first day in a master's program in a lab, when you say, I'm starting to work with X PI, or I'm starting to work at X company that works on GPCRs, and that's enough. But we want to make sure that we do have a threshold, and the threshold is being connected to the GPCR field. All right, last but not least, John.
Yes, so I'm just kind of remembering, going back. I think that the first time I might have heard about like the group would be maybe during the podcast. Actually, it would have been like a podcast that I listened to. Maybe Bob, yeah, it would have been Bob's like podcast, and I was kind of intrigued about the whole process, like the questions that was asked, and like his responses about like GPCRs and all that. And I was like, oh, it would be great to still get to listen to him more and get to understand the backstory, as like many people have said here. And so that was what I did, and I've been following until now. And I think that I was very intrigued about your enthusiasm, to ask questions. And you were able to tease out like the details of how people kind of did their research and all that. And I was really intrigued about it. I was like, oh, how did she do it? It was very, I was really amazed about that. I was like, I wanted to learn more about it and see how best I can also contribute. Because I feel like this field is really big, and so there is a need for like helping hands to make it work. And yeah, that has been my interest until now. So yeah, that's my part.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And to answer your question about how do I do it, one thing that actually happens is, so when everyone is welcome on the podcast. But if we wait for people to say, I want to come on the podcast, then we would not have an episode a week that comes out.
Yeah.
And remember, Shivani, when we started out, we had one episode every 2 weeks. And now it's every Thursday. And that's a lot of pressure because consistency is key. What that means is that we actually have emails that go out, anyone I can think of. Typically, if I meet somebody at a conference or I read a paper and I like what I read or I heard about them, then an email goes out. The person gets they get to book the time they want to have the podcast based on my availabilities in the calendar. We have, I think, a 20-page FAQ by now about how to get ready for the podcast. This goes from anything from microphone, lighting, any questions you might have, any logistical questions, it's in there. And then they also all guests get the episode outline, and it's very specifically put out there that the questions are not mandatory, because they don't fit everyone, but I think they give everyone who might feel anxious about coming on the podcast a leg to stand on and say, okay, this is what I should expect. And my goal with the podcast is to shine a light on the guest and to make them have a good time. So I've had guests who were extremely stressed out. I have guests who were very relaxed, and everything in between. I've even had a guest who with whom we went through the questions in a separate call before actually recording the episode. And that's fine because we're all different. Now, the other thing that I do is I never prepare I don't look up the person's history, because in my mind, and I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, it's been working so far. In my mind, if I don't know much about you, then the questions that I'm going to ask you are, in general, all the questions that somebody else would be interested in hearing about. And that's how I think about it. I also encourage people to ask me questions. Not everyone does it. And the podcast recordings typically last about an hour. These are recorded either very early in the morning or late in the evening, depending on where the guest is. And even if it's at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., which has happened, and I feel super tired, as soon as the camera is on and I talk to the guest, nothing else matters. And I come out of here after recording the podcast, and it's like therapy. It's like I went on a walk or went swimming or went, doing something that energizes me. And doing this podcast episodes energizes me completely. Now, one other thing I want to mention before we go around again is that the first 2 or maybe 10 episodes, but the first 2 I have in mind that are recorded, I was so afraid. The first episode with Paul, I'm so happy and I'm so grateful. I don't know if Paul listens. If you're listening to this one, I'm so grateful to you because you came on the first episode, very gladly accepted my invitation, but also you have this ability of telling stories, and I barely had to talk. I do remember listening to the stories, and I almost couldn't enjoy his stories because I was like, oh my God, now he's going to stop, and now I have to ask another question. And every guest is different, so you have to adapt to the guests. If the guest is the type of person who says yes or no, then it's hard to fill the hour, and it's my job to get them to relax and talk to us. And I don't force any questions in any direction. If I see that they don't want to talk about something, then I don't force it. Well, Shivani, I want to ask you a question, actually. How was your experience coming on the podcast?
It was fun because I think I knew you already. See, it felt like a general conversation. But as you mentioned, you also sent me like an outline of the podcast. So I've heard so many podcasts before, so I know how it's gonna be, right? Yeah, and I just thought I have to be natural and like just speak my heart and mind, and that's what I did because I know you are natural, and you just have to flow with it. You can't have everything written.
Yeah.
You can't have everything scripted. You just have to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that I had this opportunity to share my experience and how I got where I am. Yeah.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Shivani. I actually love talk, and this exactly, you described it well. It's just a conversation.
Mhm.
It's just be yourself. Monse, you were also on the podcast with Ines back in the day. Anything to add? You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was very anxious, honestly, at the beginning. Very, very anxious. And after the podcast, I felt horrible. but it's very natural to speak with you, Jamina. You have this talent that you make people comfortable. So with the time, with the conversation, I start feeling more. I start enjoying the conversation with you and Ines, but and actually, I also think that the personality of each person is very important when you are doing this kind of activities. And I feel like I'm more an introvert person, so maybe that is why I feel anxious when I have to speak in public or record a podcast. but the same is the same, like the fact that we met before um, allowed me to feel more comfortable. Mhm. More
Thank you.
familiar. Mhm.
Thank you, Monse. And then you guys, John, Yatsu, and Cam, this is your first time doing the podcast. So maybe we can talk about it when we do a one-on-one episode. But I think, and both of you, Monse and Shivani, you described it well. This is my approach. Just be yourself. I have a lot of fun. If I could do this day in, day out, I would be doing this day in, day out, because I really, really like talking to people. There was something I wanted to mention, but it escapes me. All right, so let's move on then. Before we move on, any questions for me from
Yes,
any
I
of
do
you?
have a question for you. Can I
Please,
ask?
always.
Uh, so how did you come up with this idea of developing Dr. GPCR ecosystem? Did you always dreamt of it? Did you know while you were working in the lab, um, you know, doing cell signaling assay, did you thought, oh, like I want to know like the career trajectory or like the journey of these
Yeah.
big scientists? Like, did you thought that you will make this ecosystem and bring the entire community together? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the truth is, no. I was working at a biotech company as a senior scientist in the lab when I actually realized I didn't like that role. I felt like it was time for me to move away from the lab. And I was trying to think about, okay, I don't want to leave the GPCR field. I do like to talk to people. And is there a way for me to differentiate myself? Because we are many pharmacologists who do conformation function relationship work and use Brett biosensors to answer those questions. So how do I, Yamina Bershish, differentiate myself from others? And so I can actually give that detail. I don't know if I've ever said this, but I was sitting in a Starbucks that's in a Target store in front of in here in the Boston area on a Saturday morning while I was waiting for my oldest son to finish his jujitsu class. And I was listening to this podcast called Consulting Success. And they were talking about differentiation. And as a consultant, it was a different purpose. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting. And that's when they said, well, in the 2000s, people were focused on creating a blog. And now it no longer works. And that's when I realized I actually don't particularly like to write. And it's hard for me. I think it's because of the way my brain is wired. So I said, well, how about I talk? And I remember calling my husband and saying, hey, I had this really cool idea. I want to start a podcast. And his first question was, but what are you going to talk about? And I said, that's the beauty. I won't. I will ask people questions. And so the next step was, and this was actually his idea. What you have to know is I may be the face, but both of us, both me and my husband, talk a lot about how do we serve the community and how do we develop these things. And to your point, Shivani, what I think about, what the shoes I put myself in when I think about a new program for the ecosystem is Yamina, the postdoc, and Yamina, the PhD student. How can I help Yamina, the PhD student, who might not know or not have in her immediate environment the tools, the connections, or the scientists that she wants to collaborate with in order to move her science forward? That's the person I think about when I do this. But anyway, I'm taking a detour. So I call him and I tell him this, and I say, well, I'm going to talk to people. And he said, well, you need to do a search, a market research. Take a look on YouTube, take a look on podcast platforms. Is there something like this for your field? And the answer was no. And then the next thing he said, how about you do within the field, do another market research. Pick 20 people, some you know really well, who know you really well, some who know of you or maybe know your papers, and ask them, would you come on a podcast where we talk about your career trajectory? We shine a light on you in order to show the human behind the science, but also inspire the young generation of GPCR scientists. And in this research study that we did, 75% of people I emailed responded, and 95% of them said, yes, I would come on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of it all.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
also
you.
curious
Yeah.
about the logo, Yamina. How did you come up with the idea of for the Dr. GPCR logo?
The logo. Okay, so the logo has so the name has a story too. This is set on a summer of, I want to say 20. Well, we started actually, no, I don't know when we came up with the name. Maybe this was, so we started recording the podcast in February, but I think the summer before we were already thinking about doing something. And the name Dr. GPCR, I can't say it's my idea, it's me and my husband's idea, and we can't tell who came up with it first. So we're sharing it 50-50. But the logo, we actually had a web designer who designed for me. Before Dr. GPCR, I had a personal website called yamina.org. And he designed for me a lot of elements that are in the Dr. GPCR logo and elements. And the idea is the round circles connected together is, you can think about it as kind of a model for maybe a helix from a GPCR, but also the different hubs, there are different bubbles of people and communities in the field that are interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And they have different colors as well, because we come from different, different backgrounds, different places in the world. Initially, all I told the person is, I'm thinking, here is the picture of a GPCR. This is how it looks. Here is the structure or a structure of a GPCR, and here's our goal, and this is what he came up with. Thank you, Monse, for that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really like that you said that you put yourself in the shoe of, like, PhD or postdoc, and then you see what you have to offer. And I think that's how you developed all these different symposia, or the university courses that you're offering right now. And I think that's amazing. Like that's the way to think, right? What you have to offer them, or what would they need? What's the demand?
Yeah. And again, I think of Yamina as a PhD student who didn't know much. And I think about, from yes, she was learning, but she didn't have the expertise of someone like Sam Hoare, who's giving a talk, who started, actually, the day we're releasing this podcast episode is the first day of Dr. Sam Hoare's hands-on workshop on analyzing pharmacology data. And, it's that thinking is, I wish I had someone or a resource like Sam and an ecosystem where I can go in and get that information in order to learn things that will help my research and my science.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
All right. So any other questions before we move on?
So, as a typical questions, so it has been like 4 years in the beginning. So, what motivate you along the journey? That's
Thank you, Cam. That's a great question. I think from the podcast perspective, what motivates me a lot is that I like to talk to people. I just like to talk to people. No matter who you are, where you come from, what you're working on, what's your level. It's okay because you have your own, you're the expert at the project you're working on. You have a story, you are unique. You're not just a PhD student, you're this person. And that's what pushes me forward to get more, talk to more people and get more people on the podcast. I think from an ecosystem perspective, and we're not done. I have a ton of other ideas that we haven't had a chance to implement, is again, this need to bring people together. And I don't know if I told this on the podcast or I told you this, but in 2001, I was in my second undergrad year at the University of Montreal, and Dr. Michel Bouvier was teaching a class about cellular signaling. And then Michel was taught half of the class, and the other half was taught by Dr. Ali Salahpour, who's at the University of Toronto now. And obviously they talked about GPCRs, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And since that, I do remember, I can almost tell you where I was sitting. And since then I was like, okay, this is it. And there's nothing, not that other fields are not interesting, but to me, this is it. This is the field that I feel like I'm drawn to. When I think about GPCRs, when I hear Terry Kinakin talk about GPCRs, I have goosebumps. I'm like, wow, this is actually really cool. I mean, think about it. This protein sitting at the cell membrane, sensing its environment from in and out, and responding accordingly. And you don't not only have one, you have many kinds on the same cell. And how does the cell integrate this? Like, how does that even work? And these are the things. So from a community perspective, I think this is my family, my scientific family, and I want to make sure that we come together. And obviously everybody uses this sentence and everybody knows this. When you go give a talk, you say the number of GPCRs, that known GPCRs, you talk about the number of structures, but you also say that 30 to 40% of FDA approved drugs target.
Right.
This is like
Yeah.
the
So true.
and
Right.
might sound cliche, but this is it.
Is it true?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like this, and there's still so much we don't know about them, right? Like there was a paper few months back that they found like an 8 transmembrane GPCR. And I'm like, sure. Yeah.
We'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I thought and found interesting recently. So I come from a chemokine receptor background, and so I worked on CXCR4, and I saw a paper pass. Actually, it was in the weekly news where they showed that CXCR4 for the longest time. The story was it only interacts with CXCL12, and this is important in cancer metastasis. It is important in all sorts of immune functions, and actually knockout mice of CXCR4 knockout mice, they die. So it's a lethal, mutation, not mutation, but it's a lethal thing. And there was a chemokine, and the chemokine escapes me, but apparently that chemokine is an allosteric modulator of CXCR4. And I was like, there you go. Something new that we didn't know up until now.
Yeah.
Much more to learn.
Do you miss
So maybe
being in lab or like doing? Oh no, you could go, John.
I don't know. You go for it, Shivana. Anyway, I can ask. Sorry to call you, but Yamina, I guess, I mean, you've been in this for 4 years now, but I guess many people would want to know what the mission of Dr. GPCR is, and why did you go for like an NGO status for the company? Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think this is a great question, and Shivani, we can get back to your question in a second.
No, I think
So
this question is more important.
so the mission of Dr. GPCR is to bring the community together through a variety of events and give the community the opportunity to meet. And we bring the community together through the programs that we have, being the symposia, being the virtual cafe that we had for a while, being the website that we have now. So initially, when we started out with the first version of the website, you couldn't log in, you couldn't do any of that. Right now, what you can do when you're a free site member, you can consume some of the content, but with the premium membership, which allows us to actually pay for all of this and sustain the entire activities, you can get to join groups. There is a forum. So if you were, just to give you an example, and John, this is absolutely the best time for me to mention this, October 22 to 25, we are co-organizing the Adhesion GPCR workshop that will be held in Mexico City. Won't say I may be going, we'll see, with Dr. Anthony Bocard, who actually is leading the organization actually we're co-leading putting together the program and this meeting, and this will be Dr. GPCR's absolute first in-person event. We've never done an in-person event. This is our first one. We're collaborating with the Adhesion GPCR Consortium. We're very excited about it. To your question, John, about why an NGO, why not? The goal here is to really, I think there is a cause behind it. Ultimately, the way I think about it, we're putting together all these programs. We're making this website, or there is this website where you can come together. We can meet either in person. Hopefully, we're going to be able to have more Dr. GPCR events in person, where we have these online events, which to me are very important, because when you're a student, or it's hard to travel, it's expensive to travel. Why not get together and have a conversation about our favorite topic? But all of this is to bring the community together so that together we can better understand GPCR biology and increase that 30 to 40% of drug numbers that actually FDA-approved drugs that target GPCRs. Because it's very difficult. What we're trying to do to better understand this receptor family, it's not an easy thing. And there is this, well, now I know it's not an African proverb, but that I really actually like: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we need to go far. So I hope that answers your question, John.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you. Shivani, what was your question? I'm curious now.
I do not remember my question anymore. I'm so sorry. But I was thinking of, no, because I was thinking my mind went to that in-person Dr. GPCR event, and I thought that would be cool. And I think we discussed about it like long time ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that, because we had this conversation a really long time ago when we were having like the first Dr. GPCR summit. And you mentioned that you would want to have this in person at some point of time, but that was like COVID time, right? So things were very different, and Dr. GPCR system was like also like in the developing stage, but now it's a very different ecosystem.
No, I agree. And I think, John, to your question, the NGO status allows us to actually do all of these things. We're going to go out and look for donors, partners, in order to allow us to do this. My dream is to be able to have either a yearly or every 2-year a Dr. GPCR, convention, where everyone from the ecosystem can come for free, and have sponsors and bring industry and academia together. Have maybe a 5-day conference where we go from, we start off with more of an academic meeting, and throughout the middle of the week, we morph into more of a drug discovery meeting, also on GPCRs. And this allows students and postdocs, one, to meet industry people. We're it's a different world, and you don't get exposed to it, unfortunately, enough. But at the same time, you get to see where, you working on opioids or cannabinoids, actually, what's the impact of that experiment, or what could be the impact of your current experiment on drug discovery. So that's the image I have in my mind for our first, very own Dr. GPCR in-person meeting.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I think maybe an opportunity for people from diverse background as well as from all over the world to come together to
Yeah.
celebrate like GPCR.
Yeah.
And also like Monzi mentioned, like giving an opportunity to researchers from developing country, right?
Yes.
Because there's so much talent out there. It's just about having the opportunity, Yeah.
Exactly. Speaking of developing countries, that's one thing we're doing right now with the university, is that we've offered 5 free scholarships to anyone who lives and works in a developing country to come and join us at the workshop that starts next Thursday. Actually, today, if you're listening to the podcast now, because it's important. It's very important. It's very difficult, when you work in a lab in a more developed country. It's easier to get access, to go to conferences or to sign up to classes like this. But when you're coming from a developing country, it's very difficult. This is also why within the ecosystem, if anyone lives and works in a developing country and they want to join the premium version of the ecosystem, we offer them a 90% discount. So and that's the goal. The goal is not to, it's really to serve the community. That's what we want. That's what I want. I want success stories, and they could be small or big successes, depending on who you are and what you get. Thanks for those questions. All right. Any other questions before we move on? And I have a big picture and a future question for all of you. So if you're ready, maybe let's go to the big picture. So big picture. How do you think Dr. GPCR impacted the field in the past 4 years? And maybe the answer to that is, how do you think it impacted you? And we can start with you, Shivani.
Right. I will, like, if I turn the question, I want to start with how I made an impact on Dr. GPCR, and then come to like how Dr. GPCR made an impact on me. Because it's like you do it, I know, like, there are people who are in their first year of PhD or going to start their PhD, but like I joined Dr. GPCR when I finished my PhD. So it's like, you have learned the critical thinking skill, problem solving skill, little bit of communication skill, and then you're bringing all these skills together and you're seeing how you can contribute to the community. And I think I did that by curating the newsletter, as well as by creating a brand awareness about the Dr. GPCR ecosystem and getting people together, and what Dr. GPCR has to offer in terms of newsletter, podcast, summit, symposium. There's so much, right? And then how Dr. GPCR impacted me. I think the podcast is like my most favorite thing out of Dr. GPCR, because there's no way I would know people like I would not know them if it is not for the podcast, right? And sometimes you feel alone in your journey, and you feel like you're going through this and it's so difficult for you, but then you hear other people and you connect with them because you're like, no, like, they have also been through like a similar sort of thing, and I could get through this, like, and to learn more about GPCR and to know more people in the community, because when I was in Australia, I knew more Australian, like, people working on GPCRs, and I got to US and I'm like, oh my god, the community is so bigger here. But I actually had a little bit idea about this when I started working on Dr. GPCR. And then I was getting aware of the GPCR community in the USA, which is much huge, right? And I think personally I've learned a lot from you. I feel like your communication skill, organization skill. uh, I mean, yeah, I am not a very organized. I'm like clumsy organized, and I'm still like that. But when I spoke to you, like, oh, this is like you can book on my calendar, and I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like things like that. And then you introduced me to I can't remember, but there was like a place where you could go and like organize the social media posts. Hootsuite.
Hootsuite and then Buffer, and yeah, because
Yeah,
you wrote. I mean, have you never wrote a social media post before you joined Dr. GPCR?
no.
I didn't until I started it. So, but
Yeah,
now
but
it's
I would write a social media post, but for my personal Twitter account, but never as like
Yeah.
for an ecosystem, and that was very different experience. So yeah, like I've learned a lot uh, in many ways. Like yeah, I,
I'm glad.
I think I want to hear what other people have learned or like how it has impacted them. And like in terms of how Dr. GPCR has impacted the entire world, I mean like the podcast, the symposia where you have like 1 day symposia. Earlier you would have like 2 or 3 days of summit, but now you have 1 day symposia. And what I like is that even though if I don't have time to hear about it right now, I could go back and hear the recordings, which I very much like. And also from my like even the live talks, I could hear it from my own convenience, like from lab while I'm doing something, or from like from wherever, because it's virtual, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the most beautiful part of the community, and of course you, Yamina, for bringing it to everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Shivani. You're gonna laugh. The other day, I was thinking about something, and I was like, "Oh, I know I heard a talk, but who was talking about it and when?" And it was in the ecosystem. So I actually went back, and interestingly, it was one of your talks. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
"Oh yes, 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 I do remember now." Sometimes I'm like, "Oh, where did I hear about this paper?" Or, and this, it's actually quite nice because no matter what, it doesn't get outdated. It just stops. That science stops in time, and you're like, okay, at this time, this was the topic that we were interested in, or this is the topic we talked about. So, and thank you again for, I think, spending all the time and the energy and effort to work with Dr. GPCR. You're our first ever volunteer, so we'll always be grateful for everything that you've done.
Oh, like it's my pleasure, and thank you for it's very rewarding to hear when someone remembers you through your work. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to hear that very often.
Absolutely. I think you do fantastic work. I think you're a great presenter, and you might say you're not organized and clumsy or whatever I think a word you use, but I think you're organized in your own way, and that works for you.
Yeah, you're right. But I've learned like little things from you here and there, and how can technology make your life so easier, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you, Monse. Same questions. And guys, if you have any other questions or anything for Shivani or any of us, please feel free to jump in.
Well, in the personal side, Dr. GPCR has helped me to improve my organizational skills, teamwork skills. When I joined to Dr. GPCR team, I was very naive and in this field, and honestly, like having you like a mentor has changed my life, honestly. Like,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, and all the stories that I have lived.
I know what
moved
you're
to the
saying, that, but
States.
thank you. It was my pleasure.
And thank you so much for all your mentoring, and I think my favorite part of Dr. GPCR ecosystem is the job section and the symposia, the Dr. GPCR symposia. The Dr. GPCR symposia is amazing because all the speakers that we have are incredible, and you learn new things every time. And And in the Dr. GPCR's job, you can find new jobs and opportunities in academia, but also in industry. And every month, you have new opportunities. So I love those sections of Dr. GPCR ecosystem, and I think that they are very useful. But also, I can see that the other day I was in a meeting with people from Duke University, and I hear about like the young scientists have conversations about Dr. GPCR, and now it's part of the culture of the culture of the GPCR community. So I can see that. The positive impact that Dr. GPCR is having right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Monse. No, I think you made a great point, and I think from the symposia perspective and also the job board is getting a revamp, and hopefully we're going to make it easier to go through. And we're now separating, we're actually adding extra information as to if it's an academic job or it's an industry job, and also there already has the country and the city associated, but we're trying to make it more and more user friendly. Everyone is welcome if they're hiring to share the job position, and also tell us if they filled the job position, because we like to update that. From a symposia perspective, maybe I can offer a little bit of a background story. And I know, Shivani, it's almost time for you to leave us. I don't want to kick you out, but I know that you do have a hard stop. So please feel free to jump in. For the symposia, when I say I typically I'm the one who comes up with crazy ideas, and the team is like, oh, okay, let's do this. Let's try this. And the idea was that we wanted to have a topic specific day. And that's why last year we did 5 events. It was, I think, too much, especially now that COVID, the pandemic is over and in-person meetings have resumed. So this year we narrowed it down to 3, but actually we're going to just do 2 because we're going through this nonprofit organizational change, and we want to come back fresh. And so we need the time. And one thing has been important for me for events like the symposia is to keep it as democratic as possible. So everyone is welcome to present. You can be a first-year PhD student who has really cool data and present after someone like Terry Kanaken, or before like someone like Terry Kanaken. I don't want to restrict who can give a talk. Everyone is welcome to give a talk. In order to fill the talking slots, we actually have now an entire database of potential speakers by topic, which I'm very happy to have now. And I think about, okay, who would I like to hear from? And then we invite the speakers. Sometimes, and we always tell them, if you cannot join, can you please suggest someone from your lab or another student or another person? And that's how the programs come together. And I had to say that people have been incredibly generous with their time and sharing their research with us. So I think now is the time for me to say thank you to everyone who's ever been on the podcast, on the symposia, given a talk at the summit, presented a poster. I have to say the number of poster presentations we've had is minimal, and that's something I want to encourage to have more. But we also thought about career panels. We've had a lot of great attendance to those. We had a panel discussion in March about publishing in academia, and I think that was a very successful conversation. So there's more and more coming, but just wanted to give people an idea as to how these events from the back end come together. And we're improving. Shivani, to your point about being organized, I think I'm okay being organized, but I think we can be better as a team within Dr. GPCR. And that's the next step. I'm hoping that by September, we'll revamp a lot of behind the scenes organizational things. We'll revamp most of the website and also be able to plan for the next year. Next year, we're going to come back with more courses for the Dr. GPCR ecosystem and university. So lots to do.
Can I add something?
Of course.
What amazes me every time I talk to you is your vision for Dr. GPCR. And I just feel like this is what you want. You should have a vision for whatever you do in your life. Like, even though you're doing a research, we sometimes forget the big picture, or like, we don't see it. And we're like, and it's important, like, you go into details, you figure out what's happening with the experiments, but also to see that vision and remember that vision. And to brainstorm what else you could do. Like, there's so much you could do. Like, you're coming up with ideas with Dr. GPCR. So you can apply this to your life, to your personal and professional life, and remember what your vision is, right? And also what I love is like you're so passionate about Dr. GPCR. And that reminds you why you are here. And you have to be like so passionate about what you do. Otherwise, it's 9 to 5 job and it's not fun. Like,
Exactly.
we are all here talking on Saturday evening, 7 p.m. because we're so passionate about what we do. And that's the realization I feel whenever I speak to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's beautiful. And it's beautiful to be reminded of that, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Monse, you were going to say something.
That your enthusiasm, like you are very like happy person. and it's very easy work with you, Yamina, honestly. Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And yes, it's funny because Michivani, you made a fantastic point, and I have to keep that in mind as well, because Dr. GPCR is something that I'm passionate about and where I have ideas of what next. That doesn't mean that in other areas in my life I don't, but I feel like I could use more of that, future vision that I have for Dr. GPCR and apply it elsewhere. From that perspective. And this, I think this could be really interesting for everyone, not only on the call, but listening to this podcast episode, to think about, okay, what's my vision for my future? 5 years, 10 years down the line. And that's exactly the exercise we're doing internally as a team, where I asked everyone to put together a list of things they want to achieve in the next 5 years and what are the skills they need to develop to achieve those. And one by one, I'm going to have meetings with everyone to help them do that. And it's funny because I was talking to my husband the other day and I said, oh, maybe I should do it too. And he says, you already know, you just didn't write it down. And I said, oh yeah, you're actually right. But I you're right. When you look at it from the outside, I'm always reminded of, oh yeah, I know this. I know this.
Yamina, and how do you deal with the uncertainty?
That's a very good question, and it's a tough one at the same time. It depends. I try to emotionally distance myself from things when it comes to uncertainty, to fear, to anything uncomfortable. Like, for example, if I have to give feedback to anyone, I make sure that emotion, like, for example, someone is frustrating me for any reason. And for example, it's my kids. They do things and I'm like, why did you do that? And my first reaction is to say, why did you do that? But I think about it, I'm like, no. We're just gonna distance it, because it's if I elevate my voice, it's not gonna make a point. I go there and I try to distance my feeling and say, well, here's what you've done, or here's what you have not done. And I want to understand or help you to figure out why this isn't happening. And I think I try to do the same thing with uncertainty. Now, everybody, I have my lows and my highs. And when I'm down and low, I record a podcast episode and everything is beautiful again. Exercise helps a lot too. Going for a swim, going for a walk, and doing it regularly, I think helps, the ups and downs. But it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think this is also one of the goals of the podcast, because you look at these people who have been in the field 20, 30, 40 years, very successful, and, Nature paper, Cell paper, Science paper, you name it, big lab, well-funded. And you think, wow, these guys never had a problem. Like, their life is pleasant. Remember the movie Pleasantville, where everything is perfect, and they wake up and every day they do the same thing, and everybody's always happy. No one has any problems. And I think that's not true. We're all human.
Yep.
We're all human.
I think this is fun because I feel like we are taking your interview since you take everyone's interview. So I'm very happy.
No, I'm happy too, which is why I said you should all feel free to ask me questions. No, I think this is great. Yatu, and how do you think Dr. GPCR has impact? And I know you're young in the field. You're on mute too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like you're here. So you're part of the field, and I want to hear, what do you think?
I think I would say I wish I can join the symposium because I'm really shy to talk.
Hmm.
So I wish this year I can join and present my data
Absolutely.
the symposium. Okay, and I really like podcasts as well, especially podcast 94 is my like the professor is Brian Shawkat is a professor I
Mhm.
really love. So I listened to the podcast many times, and the one quote I really love, and it's like I write down that quote and stick to my tables, and that remind me almost every day. I can share that quote. Give me a
Oh,
second.
please. Yeah, of course,
I
of
write
course.
down
And that would have been my next natural question. What's that quote? And while you look that up, I actually very much love Brian. He's awesome. I met him in person at the Gordon conference last year in June in Switzerland, and he's not only a very smart scientist, but he's a really nice guy to talk to, and very much enjoyed it. And we actually, with the group of us, went to visit a cheese factory
Ooh.
together. So I think I have a picture with all of us with like a lab coat type of thing and our hairnet, including Brian, which he emailed me about it. He said, "Can you please share that picture? I really wanna I wanna have it." So
That's
I'm
cool.
happy to show it to you guys internally. I'm not sure if Brian would be okay with me sharing that picture
Right.
on
Okay.
on social media. Did you find the quote?
Yes. He said, to the young scientists out there feel overwhelmed or unsure, remember every expert was the one a beginner. So embrace your curiosity and persist through the challenge and always be open to learning. So you are the contributing to the one of the most exciting field in the science. So where your work could potentially transform life. So this quote is like every day I will read this and like kind of like pursue me to like keep explore a new thing and to learn to explore a new thing, new ideas. Because sometimes like some of the experiment didn't work, so it's so frustrating. So yeah, every time I read this course, I remind myself why I want to join the GPCR, why I want to research. That's important. So yeah, thanks for all the opportunity here, and also like a talk with the symposium and uh, podcast. Yeah.
Thank you, Yatsu, and thank you for the energy that you bring. I really think you're bringing this really fabulous energy to the team. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Kim, let's hear from you.
So what I think that the GPCR will impact the field is just it's like a channel to connect scientists within the field, and then it also connects scientists in GPCR with the broader audiences like the public. And then in my case, I think that the GPCR will support young scientists who want to learn more about the field, give them more motivation to pursue the field. And we know that everyone has to begin at some place.
Yeah.
Yep. And then actually, when I have difficulty in my research, I usually listen to the podcast, and sometimes it gave me ideas that I can use to solve the problem. And so that's one more advantage, I think, when I listen to the podcast, not only the story, but also the idea we got from the speaker. And lots
I
of
love
them
it.
have a huge experiences in the field, and how they look at the problem is very different to the way we see. And what they talk will be like the thing that concise and very, very easy to understand, go through to what we want to know. Yep.
I love it. Thank you, Kim. I really love it. And actually, anyone who's been through the interview, actually, Shivani, back in the day, we did have a formal Zoom call as an interview, but this time with the new crop of our volunteers, we went through 2 rounds of interviews, and then they met the team behind the scenes, which I'm happy to talk about in a second. But I asked everyone, what's your favorite Dr. GPCR program? And I think most of you said podcast. And I also asked, okay, so what's your favorite Dr. GPCR podcast? And I knew that you were going to be a good fit because you didn't have to think about it. You had a ready answer as to this is the podcast that I'm interested in and that I loved. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that quote. And now I'm gonna have to go back to listen to the episode with Brian again because that quote absolutely escaped me.
Gosh, I'm so happy that I did not have to go through interview.
You would have. It's not a difficult, but I think it's hard because you need in any situation you need to be able to get to know the person, and you see how diverse our team is, which gets me, John. We're gonna get to you in a minute, which gets me to my next thing that I want to share. So behind the scenes, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 other people. So there is obviously my partner in crime, my husband Attila, and he will be taking on a lot of the program and project management within Dr. GPCR very soon. We have a wonderful video editor named Balint, who actually lives in Hungary. And Balint edits all the videos and puts things together, puts them on YouTube, puts them on, your favorite podcast platform. We have a communication and social media manager named Andreina. She is actually living in Argentina. We have an executive assistant named Ivana who lives in Venezuela. And we have, last but not least, our chief matchmaker, Mark Schmeisel, who actually lives in the Boston area, and he's our matchmaker. So he's our recruiter, basically, an in-house recruiter. So anyone looking for a position in the US so far, maybe we're going to extend matchmaking to other parts of the world. But Mark is a wonderful resource to help the community either fill a position or find a position. But for example, lately, a couple of weeks ago, he sat down with Ines, who unfortunately couldn't join us. And then Ines messaged me and she said, oh my God, Mark gave me so many great ideas as to how to perfect my resume, my CV, and how to present myself, and from A to Z. And Mark is amazing at that. One thing people always ask when they think about recruiters, it doesn't cost anything for the candidate. Because this was also Ines's first question. She said, well, I'm happy to talk to Mark, but how does this work? And actually, I got the opportunity to work with Mark when he was trying to fill a role, and I applied for that position, and we got into a nice discussion. I very much enjoyed working with him, and he's been our Dr. GPCR chief matchmaker for almost a year now. So, and the team is going to continue to grow, but very excited to have everyone on. And then last but not least, John, let's hear from you.
Yes. So I think that the impact of this project has been great. Like Dr. GPCR has really impacted the field in a lot of ways. The newsletter that you guys bring out every week now, or so, has been really important in the field because it kind of gives the field a lot of information as to what's going on, what are the new targets, what are the new technologies that are currently being used in the field. So I think the impact has been great. The symposiums, for those of us in Australia, it's kind of weird because mostly in the US, the timing is different. And so it's taking a bit of effort for some of us to kind of go into it, but I think that it's been great. Anytime I join the sessions, I've learned a lot, and it's great to see what people are doing and see where you can learn more from and what you can take from it. And so for that, I think it's been great. The symposiums also serve as a platform where you can meet people. So there were times where we matched like different PIs to students and stuff like that. And for me, it was great to kind of share my research to like PIs in the US and also get feedback from them. And so it's been great. The podcast especially has been one that I've binged on, I would say, because it's good to know the work of people, but also get the backstory. And so when you listen to the podcast, I think what you get from is that it's not all rosy. I mean, it's taking a lot of hard work. I think the recent podcast you had with Arthur kind of has been the highlight for me, because Arthur is someone we know in the field. We know he's done a lot of work in the field, but to get his backstory as to how he rose through to become the dean now, it's amazing, and it really inspires a lot of young scientists to want to do their best. So yeah, the impact is great, and I'm sure that in the coming years, people would really get to know more about what we are doing, and also come on board, basically. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And Arthur is incredibly generous, incredibly generous. I had lots of fun talking to him, and I hope I get to meet you and Cam as well in person, maybe at our next in-person Dr. GPCR meeting.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely incredible. And again, it humanizes the scientist. It does humanize the scientist. So I very much loved recording our second episode with Arthur about, the stage of his career where he became dean, and everything that he's learned. I mean, I left that conversation. I always leave the conversation pumped up, but this one was very interesting because I think he was the first person with whom we've separated it in two, where we talked about the academic career, leading a lab and the science and everything, and then the deanship and everything that came with it. I mean, when he mentioned that, it's such a high level position that prime ministers take your call.
It is. Especially during COVID. During COVID, it was
exactly
great. I mean, because for some of us, we got to see what was happening, and because our college was involved in the COVID vaccine and all that, you get to see ministers coming, and of course, Arthur and the rest would be there to meet them and all that. So yeah, you would really see the impact he was making in that area.
Exactly.
And yeah,
exactly.
It's good.
Exactly. No, so I think that's phenomenal when you think about it. There's no other way to describe it. So super. Any last words? Unfortunately, Shivani had to go, which we knew. I'm very grateful that she was able to come and join us. Anything, team, internal team.
Yeah,
anything
I think for me, since I'm on since I'll say something. I think I would want to really thank you for the opportunity you've given to all of us. I mean, you've done a very amazing job doing this for the past 4 years, and to bring some of us on board, I think it's really generous of you, and I would like to really thank you on behalf of the entire team, I guess, and to also not assure you, but to say that we are here also to help to make this your dream a success. So we'll be looking forward to giving in our best, looking forward to doing life together, and gets the whole project to the next level, I guess. Yeah. So thank you so much, Yamina.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Monse?
Yeah, I also want to thank you, Yamina, and everyone for to be here today speaking about Dr. GPCR, and I just feel very, very, very grateful for the opportunity. I think all the work that you have been done for the last 4 years has been amazing, and I hope I can still working with you guys for the next years for the future, and I always try to do my best every time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Monse. Yeah, too.
I'm excited and very grateful to join this team and learn a lot during our meeting and schedule. And I also I'm excited to contribute here right now. But I have a question for you.
Please.
Just what advice would you give the young scientists interested in GPCR research? I know the first one is join Dr. GPCR. The second one will
Ecosystem.
be
Yes.
yeah.
Join the ecosystem. Why aren't you on? I'm kidding. But yeah, actually, I'm not that much. Not kidding that much. All right. So what advice I would give to young scientists about how to can you just elaborate? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh yeah. What advice would you give the young scientists are interested in GPCR research?
I can reiterate what everyone has said on and off on the different podcasts. Be curious, read widely, read constantly, although that's a very difficult thing to do when you have experiments in the lab. I think that's the toughest thing. And it's what I realize, and this is not only about reading, when you're developing any skill, consistency is key. So and I've been in these shoes. And again, it's Yamina, the PhD and the postdoc, who was thinking, oh, this could be solved like that. Read every day. 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes. I skim sometimes the news. Sometimes I skim the industry news. I'm on LinkedIn. I set up alerts that I get an email every week about specific topics, PubMed, and you just go through it relatively quickly. You don't have to know how many microliters they use in experiment XYZ to get to that. Just read the abstract. There is an inherent structure to these. So I typically go at the end of the introduction, read the abstract, read whatever at the end of the introduction, and go read the part of the discussion. And that just gives me an idea, just to keep being updated all the time. The other thing is that, to Shivani's point, think as a big picture. Think as to where do you want to be in the next 5 years? What do you want to do? And not only in science, but in your life as well. Like, what kind of life do you want to have? What does that look like? Do you want a dog? Do you want to live by the beach? Do you want to live by the mountain? What do you want to do, from Monday to Friday? What kind of job do you want to have? And these are not easy questions. It goes back to the consistency. Once you have these questions jogged down, every day try to think about them and write down things. And that will change from your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. That changes. So I think it's try to keep, again, this is advice from Yamina today to Yamina as a PhD. Don't stick your head into the petri dish and the experiment. Just look up and think about what next. I think this pretty much says it. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Of course. Cam, last but not least.
So personally, Dr. GPCR has a very special meaning for me because it's accompanied with me from the beginning of my journey with GPCR. And I love the way you set up and run all the ecosystem, and especially in the team meeting. I love the the bonding. I love the bonding game, and like I learned a lot in the management perspective from you, and thank you for that. So yeah, thank you for doing all the things. Yep, very very grateful.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you for that, and thank you everybody for the kind words. I just want to also mention that. So our team last year for my birthday surprised me. So I got a flower delivery for the first. I was wondering, like, who sends me flowers for my birthday, other than my husband, who actually gets them delivered through Amazon. But I got 2 bouquets, and I also got the most wonderful thing. It was a short video from everyone on the team collated together with the Dr. GPCR theme music, wishing me a happy birthday. And that was the best birthday gift ever. So I'm very grateful to everyone on the team, all of you. I think there's lots to do, but we're having fun doing it, so we don't feel the amount of work that needs to be done. I'm very grateful for all of you to be here. I'm always happy to support, always happy to help. And Kim, you were referring to the meeting. So we try to meet on a regular basis. And the second half of the meeting is all about getting to know each other. We all live in a different, most of us live in a different time zone. I think Yatsu, Monse, and me live in the same time zone, although far from each other. But we need to get to know each other. Hopefully we get to meet in person, but we played this team building activity card game, which was a lot of fun, and we couldn't stop doing it. At some point I had to say to you, John and Cam, go to sleep, it's too late.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so now thank you so much. Thank you again for all of you for being here. I think this was a really cool conversation. Before I let you all go, I just want to mention two things. I'm going to stop recording in a second. Don't go anywhere. And the other thing is I want to say thank you to everyone who's ever participated to the podcast or to any Dr. GPCR event activity. I also want to say thank you to all of those GPCR scientists at all sorts of levels who introduced me to our next speaker, our next guest, our next friends. I found mentors, I found friends within our community, and we're here hopefully for a long time to grow the Dr. GPCR ecosystem, which is now a nonprofit organization. We're very excited about that. We have lots of things to do, and hopefully we can bring everyone together in order to better understand GPCR biology. With this concludes episode 150. I can't believe I'm saying 150 of the Dr. GPCR podcast. I think we've achieved a lot during these 4 years, and there's much more to do. Now the work can begin.
Yeah. And we miss Ines.
We absolutely missed her.
Yeah.
Just maybe, see, this is something I wanted to do in the beginning. So before maybe we stop, I just want to say thank you also to Ines. Ines just completed her PhD at the University of Geneva. Ines and I have chemokine receptors in common. We love chemokine receptors, and unfortunately she couldn't be here because of a conflict, but it was also 1 a.m. In Geneva when we would have started, and it completely escaped our minds that it was such a big difference in time. So if correct me if I'm wrong, in Australia it's 10 a.m. or close to 10 a.m. if I remember.
Yes,
Yeah,
close to 10 a.m. and 8 minutes more to 10 a.m. So
yeah, we're getting there, and it's almost 8 p.m. here.
Yeah.
In the US. So, and Yatsu also in Florida. We're in the same time zone, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it would have been 1 a.m. and it is this is what happens. For some reason, Ines was sure it was 1 p.m. and not 1 a.m. and she realized it too late. But she was Ines, you were missed. And I really want to thank you as well, and thank everybody who's ever contributed to the team. And again, always welcome to get feedback. Just email us hello@drgpcr.org. The hello@drgpcr.com email still works. We're always looking for speakers for our events. We're always looking for teachers for Dr. GPCR University. We're always looking for podcast guests so that we can continue inspiring the entire community. With this, thanks everybody. I'm going to stop recording now.
Bye.
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 Bye.